So this might be one of my more controversial takes. 2003 Bionicle. I don't know how I feel about it. Here's the thing. I think if I had to summarize my thoughts, it is a year that trades off ambition for story. What do I mean by that? Well, we got a lot of sets in 2003 Bionicle. Obviously, we got Takanuva, our final Toa Nuva set, but we also got Makuta to pair with him. And I think right off the bat, if I were to stare at a shelf with only 2003 sets on it, I'd love it. This year looks really good. The sets look really good, really well polished. But conceptually, they're actually not as interesting as what came before, in my opinion. That's what I mean by ambition. 2001 Bionicle, if nothing else, was very ambitious. And I think 2002 was actually a fantastic spiritual successor to what came before. Trading off the Rahi sets that we got as our main villains from 2001 for the Borak, my personal favorites of all of the enemies from Bionicle. Maybe outside of the Rahi. And we still got the Master Builder set in 2002 either, so it's not like we were left high and dry on Rahi. We did get some. 2003 also, of course, gave us Rahi in the form of Puku and Taku, with some combination models therein too. But 2003 was interesting at the very least because in one way, it was kind of a year where we didn't get any good guys. Like, yeah, again, we got Takanuva, we got the Matoran, but what did we get for canister sets? The Rakshi, the Borak Cow? That's an interesting one to me. And I'd say it lacks ambition because although the functionality of the Rakshi was novel, it was new, right? That side-to-side swinging motion was something we hadn't really seen before, something that LEGO hadn't even considered, as far as I can tell. And yet, it worked really well because it didn't actually require that many specialized pieces. I'll get back to that. But where I think 2003 sort of drops the ball, and it does so with intent, right? For budgeting reasons, for many reasons, is in part coloration and in part those functions, going back to it. The function of the Puku and Takua set specifically is among my favorite from all of Bionicle. As simple as it is to understand how it works, if you don't have that set, if you have the pieces to build it, I would encourage you to do so, even if it's a different color. It's such a fun set to play around with. It's a little bit too large to be like a full-on desk toy, but it's pretty damn close. And of course, if you want a smaller version of a build that does a similar thing, but definitely functions as a desk toy, check out my Bonora crab. I'll make it free over on the Discord server so you can build it yourself. It is a scuttling crab that rolls and scuttles side to side. It's great, but that's not the purpose of this video. That said, 2003 Bionicle is interesting to me because a lot of its functions end up just becoming the same function repeated, right? The Rakshi function is no different, all things considered, to the Matoran function. I'm glad the Matoran have a function, of course. It means they can play the mask game if you want them to. You have that option now, and that's good. I appreciate that. I even appreciate the fact that they still keep their softer head material, making them still easier to defeat than a typical Toa Mata would be, which makes sense. They're Matoran after all. And I've talked about that in a video as well. But I think generally speaking, once you look at the Matoran, you look at the Rakshi, you look at Makuta, they all look great. But functionally, they're not very different from each other. And then you pull back from that a moment, you start looking at some of the combination models, even looking at a set like Gaku, for example. A fantastic looking set, and I really admire the fact that it has 4 wings, although I'm not familiar with any like media depiction of it having 4 wings. Maybe it does in the movie. I honestly can't remember. But the point still stands that the main reason I think that set has 4 wings is because the function on that set isn't actually the most dynamic thing in the world. It moves the wings, sure, but they don't move that far. And having 4 of them and having a function that's easy to just reciprocate, to just go and play with over and over and over again, makes it sort of give you the illusion of the wings moving faster, moving further than they really do. Like, if you blur your eyes a moment and just think that the bird has 2 wings when you're flapping that function, it really feels like the wings travel much further. But like my ornithopter design, which is something you can hardly see behind me back there, uses a function that achieves a similar result, just kind of better, more movement overall. Not the point of this video, but the point I'm getting at is that although I love the idea of the function, it's not actually that complicated to understand. And so I sort of fall back on my thoughts. 2003 Bionicle just isn't as ambitious as I think we gave it credit for, but it has one hell of a story. And I think that's kind of its saving grace. Because even going forward from there, 2004 kind of falls into the same traps as 2003. The functions that we see, I think at the very least in the Dark Hunter series from that year, we do get some interesting functions, albeit not always for the best. But at the very least, the canister sets, the functions in those, don't always do it for me because they're not trying to do anything new this time around. And I think one of the reasons I like the Toa Mata sets and the Borak sets is that both of their functions were brand new for their time. And then they were repeated. And that's when they got boring, right? I know that 2002 Bionicle gets a decent amount of criticism, especially in its later half with the introduction of the Toa Nuva, but for all intents and purposes, I do think that the Toa Nuva are good spiritual successors to the Toa Mata sets. They do look, at least visually, stronger than they were before. It doesn't mean that I like them better. I don't think that I do, but at the very least, I can understand why they're designed the way they are. And I'm actually somebody who has come around quite a lot on the design of the Toa Nuva masks. I know that that's very washed out red here. It's not going to work out too well. The point still stands. And I do think that there's a lot of criticism to levy on the Toa Nuva, especially on their masks as well. But I can at least appreciate that LEGO was trying to do something new with those masks, even if they didn't necessarily hit it out of the park. I'm still somebody who's going to defend the Toa Nuva masks in most regards. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. Do you dislike them? Sure. And is that valid? Absolutely. But I think they work well enough for what they're trying to do. And for the mask game, they're great, honestly. But that's kind of it, right? 2003 is, in a lot of ways, the beginning of the end of what I identify with of Bionicle. And that's not to say that it goes in a bad direction, because I don't think that it does. It's just that the focus shifts on what that toy was and what that toy would become. I appreciate the novelty, the newness of those sets in 2001, the sheer technical feats that were accomplished by all of the Rahi, 2001 through 2003, and what the canister sets were able to do in 2001 with the Toa Mata, what the canister sets were able to do in 2002 with the Borak, which in some ways were an improvement and destroyed that mask game. I've talked about that as well. And 2003, in some ways, when it comes to approaching the mask game, steps backwards. When it comes to approaching functions, steps backwards. Aesthetically, though, it kind of finds its own, and I do admire that. I'm not the biggest fan in the world of the Usul Nui, the vehicle that's paired with Takanuva. I think the function is kind of cool, albeit I think it's better in theory than in practice, let's say. And I'd love to revisit it at some point in time. I think aesthetically it's interesting that it uses 6 Rakshi bodies, sort of hinting at the fact that the Rakshi had been defeated by the time that it was created. That it uses the dark gray How on it to signify Jalar's defeat in 2003 as well, right? Overall, I like these sets. I think 2003 is a really good year. And I'd still consider it the golden age, right? Like, it doesn't end for me in 2002. It just slows down. It recognizes it doesn't have to be the ambitious toy it was anymore. It recognizes it doesn't have to take as many risks as it did before because it's established now, right? 2001 Bionicle needed to succeed. 2002 didn't necessarily have to succeed to the same degree, but why not let it, right? But 2003, at this point, Bionicle was established. It was a known quantity. It had a loyal fan base. And so, hey, pump out a movie, sell some toys, and you don't have to spend quite as much time developing those sets, those toys, those parts, and those functions. And I still think that the sets overall looked great for what it's worth. Even 2004, the Vaki still look cool. Don't get me wrong. Toa Metru look amazing as well. Even the Metru Matoran, I'm not the biggest fan of them, but they do look good at the very least. But like I said, I guess it all depends on what you find value in when it comes to Bionicle. Whether or not you're going to like the years you like. And, you know, it also depends on at what point you came into Bionicle. I'm lucky enough to have gotten my first Bionicle in 2001. My Toa Tahu set that I got for my birthday. And I stuck with it pretty much the entire time. I've definitely had my dark ages, don't get me wrong. But I was there at the beginning, and I know that that's not a privilege that everybody has. According to my own demographics, some of these people weren't even alive in 2001. And so, like, I get it. But it's still fun, right? I think every year has something to love about it. 2005 even, which is probably my least favorite year from Bionicle for a handful of reasons, and it has some growing pains. Still has the Vizrak, some of my favorite canister sets we got from Bionicle in general. And something else I noticed too is every year, at least up until 2006, at least one of the 2 canister sets released for that year was clone sets, right? The Borak are all identical builds to each other. The Roxy are all identical builds to each other. The Vaki are all identical builds to each other. 2005 switches it up by making the Hordika, the good guys, all identical to each other. And 2006 still gives us the Paraka. The Anika to some degrees too, but at least they change the arms around a little bit. That's something. The feet around a little bit. Yeah, the Paraka do it too, but is that worth considering? Anyway, point being, getting ahead of myself, 2003 Bionicle. Less ambitious, more story-driven. Yes, it's okay. So let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. What is your favorite year from Bionicle? What's your least favorite year, and why? And if you want to follow that question up, let's go and dive into the story. What year's story do you like best? What year's builds do you like best? What year's alternate models? And if you want to take that conversation further, you can check out the links for Discord, Instagram, and Patreon, all of which are down in the description below. Again, you can check out whatever I said that I was going to post on Discord. I don't remember it already, but I'll figure it out when I watch this video back. And of course, make sure you like and subscribe if I didn't say so already. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.